Hello everybody, and welcome back to yet another book to game comparison video. Today I'm going to be talking about the Nancy Drew adventure game Warnings at Waverly Academy. And as usual, I'm going to be comparing the novel with the game. And in this case, our novel is The Curse of the Black Cat, and it was published in 2001. And then the game we're going to be looking at is right there on the screen. I've already given its title. It is Warnings at Waverly Academy. And it was released 8 years after the book in 2009. So as usual, a spoiler alert is in effect because I'm going to be talking about all sorts of details, including specific events from both the book and the game, as well as who the culprits are. So please consider yourselves forewarned. And with that, let's jump on into the novel. So this is The Curse of the Black Cat. It is book number 158 of the Nancy Drew Mystery Stories, and these books are also often referred to as the Digest Paperback series. So the premise for this book is that Nancy and George are asked to come to Waverly Academy on behalf of Mrs. Cook, who is the headmistress. And she asks for their help because there's someone who's been threatening students at the school. And in order to do this investigation, the two friends go undercover as teaching assistants. And what we learn is that the person doing these pranks, if you want to call them that, they're a bit more malicious than that, they're calling themselves the Black Cat. And after each incident, they leave a note for their victim to find, which is rather cruel. And so we've had some accidents before. Nancy and George come on board, as well as while they're undercover. So we've got a slew of things that are ongoing, including a step up in the severity of the incidences. We have a faculty member who winds up kidnapped, and a ransom demand is made for her safe return. So things suddenly get a whole lot more serious. And then not long after that, a student, and then Bess kind of shows up. She helps to trail the students. They also disappear. So we've gone from these cruel pranks and accidents to 3 people going missing and being kidnapped. And there are a whole bunch of characters in this book that I really couldn't list them all. I've just listed the ones who come up a few times in the story. So, of course, we have Mrs. Cook. Again, that's the headmistress. We have Miss Angela Friedlander, and she is a new English teacher at the school, and she's the one who's kidnapped. And then we have quite a few students. We have Lucy Slingluff, Eliza McBride, Francesca Marco, Lila or Leela Van Voorhees. And I make that distinction because depending on which part of the world you're from, her name could be pronounced differently. We have Kalisha Jones, Rosie Singh, and Catastrophe, also known as Tassie, who is a cat. So as our story unwinds, what we learn is that the pranks were used to divert attention from the culprit's real goal, which was to kidnap, again, Lila or Leela, and extort her father for money. And our perpetrator was Miss Friedlander. She'd faked her own kidnapping in order to exact revenge on Mr. Van Voorhees, and also to divert attention from herself as being a suspect. And the reason for her kidnapping, it will be discussed in a little while when I talk about the endings for the 2 versions of the story. But there we go. That's our general premise for The Curse of the Black Cat. We have someone who is pranking students and things become much more severe. We have a kidnapping, and we learn that it is a staff member and not a student who is behind these cruel acts. So now let's take a quick look at the game. This is Warnings at Waverly Academy, game number 21 of the Her Interactive PC game Nancy Drew Adventure series. So in this version of the story, we have Nancy who goes undercover as a transfer student to help seek out whoever it is who's been targeting valedictorian candidates with rather dangerous pranks at a prestigious boarding school. And the person who's been pranking the students goes by the name the Black Cat. And the victims receive a warning note first, and if they receive a second note, then they are attacked in some way. And the pranks or accidents are so severe that some of the students have actually left the school. They've been pulled out, and in one case, the parents are threatening to sue the school. So the characters we have here are all students. We have Corrine Myers, Mel Corbelis, Rachel and Kim, who we learn about a little bit later, Hubbard, Leila Yadav, and Izzy Romero. And how things wind up in the game are that the Black Cat notes were sent by the Hubbard twins, who are not actually the Black Cat, but they were being blackmailed by the Black Cat because they had learned that they were actually 2 students pretending to be one person. They both were, or I should say, only one was admitted to Waverly Academy, not both. So they have this secret. And the true perpetrator is Corinne. And she needed her classmates to be out of the way, so this is why she's pranking them and getting them sort of out of the school, so that she could find this hidden, unpublished collection of Edgar Allan Poe's that she believed to be on the school property. So there we go for our premise for Waverly Academy. Very different. We have a student who is perpetrating the crimes, as is the initial suspicion. And we've got this extra mystery, or secret rather, this twist with Rachel Hubbard having a twin that no one else knows about, and they trade places in throughout the school day and year, each taking one class over the other. So very different story. So with that, let's start our comparison between the book and game. So really looking at what's similar and what's changed. So our title is the first thing that's different. So we have the book, which is called The Curse of the Black Cat, and the game title has been changed to Warnings at Waverly Academy. Both titles are suitable for both stories, and I'm not sure as to the reasoning for Her Interactive changing it and not sticking with The Curse of the Black Cat. I mean, they've certainly kept the original titles before in much of the earlier games, but here they chose to change it. I do actually like the title that they've gone with. It rolls off the tongue really well. I can appreciate some alliteration, and really does tell you what our mystery is about, and these warnings or these threats at the school, Waverly Academy. But they could have just as well stuck with The Curse of the Black Cat, because the perpetrator is calling themselves the Black Cat, and maybe not necessarily cursing students, but certainly threatening them. So either title is good, but I do like them both. And then our storylines are very similar. For the book, we have Nancy and George together, who pretend to be teaching assistants to uncover whoever is attacking and then eventually kidnapping staff and students. Whereas in the game, we have Nancy, who goes undercover as a transfer student, so a slightly different role at the school and on her own. And this is to unearth a student who's performing malicious pranks on her classmates. No kidnapping involved. Our locations, as far as the school goes, is the same. They're both at Waverly Academy, but the locations are different. In the book, it's in River Heights, whereas in the game, it's considered in upstate New York, in the Adirondacks, so, different part of the country. But otherwise, pretty much the same. So these first three elements, some changes, but they all work together. They're all kind of similar. So now we can look at the characters, and this is a really interesting comparison because we see a lot of overlap with multiple characters, so the setup is a little bit messier than in previous comparisons. But we're going to start with Angela and Rita. And Rita wasn't mentioned prior to this, but if you've played the game, you'll understand who she is, but I'll explain here too. So Angela, again, this is the new English teacher at Waverly in the book, and she is, we think, pranked by the Black Cat. So Tassie, this wild cat that roams around the property, was in her desk drawer, and when she goes to open the drawer, the cat jumps out and everyone freaks out, and there's a threatening note. So we assume she's been pranked by the Black Cat. Later on, she is supposedly kidnapped by the Black Cat. What we learn is that she is actually the culprit in the book. She made these pranks just against herself. The one with Tassie wasn't initially intentional. She came into her office and happened to find the cat snoozing in her drawer, and she happened to have some threatening notes with her. So she sort of took advantage of this situation, which really evolved into her kidnapping herself, I say that in air quotes, to lead to her continuing her crimes against the Van Voorhees. Now, if we compare her with a character who's mentioned in the game, this is not a physical character, but a character created and who existed in the past. And her name was Rita Hallowell. And she was a nurse who helped care for Edgar Allan Poe when he was in hospital. She was also a teacher at Waverly, and it was rumored that she had died of a heart attack after the students who didn't like her had pranked her. So here we have sort of some overlap in terms of them both being teachers and interesting relationships, shall we say, with the students. And, some tie to a Black Cat. But so those are, I can sort of considered Rita being taken a little bit from Angela, and just in terms of having a teacher really involved in the storyline. It's a bit of a weak connection, but there you go. But now we can look at some of the students where things are a little bit more concrete. So we'll start with comparing Francesca and Rachel. So in the book, Francesca is a transfer student, and she has this tendency to not complete her schoolwork, and she comes off as being rather spacey. And she also feeds Tassie, again, that wild cat. So kind of viewed as an airhead, if you will, and just not into things at all. And then we can look at Rachel from the game, and she does poorly on an exam, and she's trying to improve her grade with her website assignment. So it's not that she doesn't complete her work, but she is sort of doing poorly. So there's where we see some overlap with her and Francesca. And also she's viewed as being rather strange. Her classmates are kind of scared of her, and one of them even says she's kind of schizoid. So there we go as far as spacey, schizoid, these strange personalities, and other students not really feeling comfortable around the two. That's very similar between these two characters. So we can see where Rachel was pulled from Francesca. And then we can look at Rosie and Mel. So as far as the book goes, we had Miss Friedlander who'd accused Rosie of plagiarizing an essay on the black cat. So there's the black cat again. What we learned is that she did actually buy her paper and from a male student at another school. Now, so here's where her interactive was really smart. In the game, we have Mel, who's also been accused of plagiarizing a paper. In this case, it's about art history. But she wasn't actually guilty. She was framed, but the person who appears to have uploaded that other document was a student from a male boarding school. So not only do we have these two students accused of plagiarism, but the other people involved are both male students from the neighboring boarding school. So I like that her interactive chose to include that aspect in to the game as well. It wasn't necessary, it didn't drive the story that much, not as far as Mel's storyline goes, but it was perfect. They were able to incorporate it, and I'm glad that they did. Our next set of students, and this is where things get really messy because we have like a four-way overlap, are Kalisha and Eliza from the book and Corinne and Izzy from the game. So bear with me as I try to make sense of all these different overlapping characteristics. So from the book we have Kalisha, and she's a senior whose thesis was deleted from her computer and the backup disk was taken. And then we have Eliza, so another character from the book, who is a senior whose hair was cut off by the black cat. Now we don't see that happen in the game, but she's really dramatic and she often blames others for incidents without proof. Those two we can kind of tie in with Izzy, who I'll talk about later, but I'll start with Corinne from the game. She receives a black cat note, but she doesn't actually get attacked. There are no incidences against her. But her major is English, and that sort of ties in with the character of Kalisha. And also their names they're not perfectly similar, but somewhat similar. And in addition to that, Corinne is the culprit in the game. Then we can look at Izzy, also from the game. Her term paper was deleted from her computer, and she did not have a backup. So that's where we see overlap with Kalisha. Kalisha's thesis was deleted. She actually had a backup. Izzy's term paper was deleted. And we also have Izzy known for stealing others' boyfriends, and I find her kind of dramatic. And I've put her with Eliza just because I think that their names are also rather similar. Eliza and Izzy, this Z similarity. So that's why I've put those four sort of together. There's quite a bit of overlap between the four of them. And next we can look at Lucy and Lila. So again, I've got two characters from the book, and they've sort of been merged with the character of Leela from the game. So we'll start by looking at the book characters. So Lucy is the captain of the basketball team, and her lucky shoes were covered in tar. Then we can look at, again, Lila or Leela, depending on which pronunciation you go by. Her glasses were swapped, and so she's wearing these other glasses that aren't great. There's a whole other story behind that I won't get into. And then she is eventually kidnapped. So then if we look at the character of Leela from Waverly, Warnings at Waverly Academy, the game, she is considered the athletic superstar. So that's where we see connection with her and Lucy. They're both into athletics. And she started to wrap her wrist after receiving a threat from the black cat. And just a side note, her boyfriend is also stolen by Izzy. And then our connection with her and the book character of Lila or Leela is again that name. So when I read it, I tended to read it as Lila, but whenever I read fiction from other parts of the world, like I was reading a Filipino series recently, there's a character with the same spelling name, but I read it as Leela. So I think that's where her interactive took their game character. They chose this Lila Leela, but changed the spelling to make it clear her name is Leela. So those are the two book characters that Leela Yadav is derived from. And it's a little complicated, but it's all there, and I hope it made sense. So then I just wanted to talk about a few other similarities between the two mediums. We've got black cats in both stories, and they're both troublesome. And so in the book we have Catastrophe, again also known as Tassie, and it's a wild cat that doesn't trust most people, but lives on the school property. In the game, there was that storyline about Rita Hollowell, and she had a black cat named Usher, who was said to roam the grounds. So there's our overlap as far as the cats go. And something else that happens in both stories, that Nancy receives threats. In the book, there is a note left for her on the spoke of her bicycle. She rides to the school because it's not that far away. Whereas in the game, the 2 threats that she receives are delivered to her room. So a little different, but she doesn't have a room in the game. In the book. So they had to be delivered a little bit differently. Then, as already noted, there are 2 boarding schools for both stories, one for males and one for female students. In the book, the boys attend Granger Academy, whereas in the game, it's called Oxborough Preparatory. So another similarity, different names, but still we have this presence of a couple boarding schools. And then I also wanted to make note that we have this wonderful winter setting in both. Winter just makes me happy. I love the snow. I hate the cold, but I love the snow. So they both take place around what they call midwinter break, but when that is actually different between stories, because in the book, it's set just before the break, but in February. So we're in the second half of the year. Whereas in the game, it's set during the break, but the break is in November. So very different. And we both have snow, or both stories have some snow falling in them. As the stories progress, we get more and more snow. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is the ending. So they are very different endings. And I know I sometimes don't bother talking about them, but I thought it would be worthwhile in this case. So for the book, we have Nancy and George who wind up going to the nearby cemetery because this is where they've been asked to deliver the ransom money for Lila or Leela's safe return. And they don't actually have the money, so they stuff an envelope of not real money, and they're going to deliver this to the culprit, who they've essentially established as being Miss Friedlander. And they learn over the course of the story that she had blamed Mr. Van Voorhees for her father's death. So this is sort of why she's trying to exact revenge on the family. And while they're on their way to the cemetery, George injures her ankle, and she winds up just waiting at a mausoleum once they make it to the cemetery, while Nancy goes to make the delivery. And as things go along, she drops off the envelope, sees Miss Friedlander, who she then confronts, but Miss Friedlander has come with a giant knife and threatens Nancy with it. She chases her, they run through the cemetery, and then they nearly fall off of a cliff. Things get kind of insane. George, who, as I noted, was hanging out at the mausoleum, hears some sounds coming from within, and lo and behold, there are Lila and Bess. And she frees them, and then the 3 of them go rescue Nancy and Angela. So things get a little crazy there. And just a little bit more of that backstory. So I'd noted that Angela Friedlander blames Mr. Van Voorhees for her father's death. And this is because he is an investor. And her dad, Angela's dad, had invested a whole lot of money sort of at the recommendation of Mr. Van Voorhees, but not quite. He went a bit further than his suggestion. It tanked, and then he started having these sort of like blackouts. He was in poor health after losing a whole lot of money, and he had fainting spells, and he was driving, and it's suspected he had a fainting spell, and the car crashed, and he, his wife, and Angela's cat died. So she lost her family, essentially, and she blamed Mr. Van Voorhees for that, because the fainting spell she blames on the stress of losing money, which is blamed on the poor advisement of Leela's father. So there's this whole depth to why Angela does what she does. So that's the ending for the book. Now, in the game, things are really quite different. Nancy winds up following these clues that are left behind by Rita Hollowell, and these lead her to a hidden room behind a furnace in the Waverly Academy cellar. So she stays on property the whole time. She doesn't leave to go off to a cemetery. And once she's in this hidden room, she finds Corinne standing over Poe's last works. Corinne quickly snatches it and leaves the room. Nancy has to deal with, nearly getting sliced in half, but she leaves, and the 2 wind up in Mel's room. Mel has a bit of a freak out and needs to know what's going on and doesn't let the 2 girls leave until everything's explained. And as a result of this, Corinne is caught. So talk about different endings and different motivations. They're totally different For our book, it's about revenge over the loss of a family, whereas in the game, it's about looking for this unpublished work, which is really valuable. And, Corinne sort of said it, that when she does research, and she really wanted to find this document. So, yeah, very, very different endings and reasons for these stories. So with that, let's conclude. So Her Interactive's 2009 rendition of the 2001 novel follows the main storyline very well with a few alterations. So there's no kidnapping in the game, and the storyline involving Edgar Allan Poe and the Black Cat are really expanded upon in the game. As far as the book goes, there's just an assignment about the Black Cat as well as the culprit leaving notes signed the Black Cat. In the game, we have this deeper story about Edgar Allan Poe and looking for this missing book of stories by him. And then, of course, the motivation for our culprit is to find more of Poe's works. And this tie with Rita Hollowell, who formerly worked at the school, having been a nurse to Edgar Allan Poe. It's just so much deeper and more involved in the game. Now the storyline about Poe. And then the characters from the book are all incorporated into the characters of the game. And again, there's a lot of overlap. It's a little complex, but they all are mashed together. The settings are the same, so they're both at Waverly Academy, different parts of the states, but still set at the same school, and both of them are a boarding school. Also both set in winter, we've got some snow, and both around midterm break. And then the viciousness of the attacks that are perpetrated by the Black Cat are very similar. I mean, they're quite severe. I mean, in the book, we have a girl whose hair is chopped off. That's pretty intense. That's not a small thing. Compare that with something from the game, like a girl who is claustrophobic being locked into a dark closet overnight. Truly horrendous. So very vicious and malicious attacks. Now, as already noted, the reasons for the crimes do differ significantly between the two mediums. So I don't want to get too in-depth about that because I just talked about it. But basically, one is about family and revenge. The other is about a famous author's last works. And Warnings at Waverly Academy. So the game is, in my view, one of the best and most closely followed adaptations that Her Interactive has ever done. It's just so similar to the source material. It's really quite amazing. They did a spectacular job. It's so wonderful, and the stories themselves for both the book and the game to me are intriguing and enjoyable. So there we go, everyone. That is my comparison for The Curse of the Black Cat and Warnings at Waverly Academy. Truly a spectacular job done, as I just said. It's really quite amazing how much Her Interactive was able to incorporate from that source material, so The Curse of the Black Cat, into the game. And even though they changed the title, which wasn't necessary at all, the title they went with worked really well. They could have kept the title of the book. It all overlaps wonderfully. They're not two different stories like we've seen in other games. So this is all just done so incredibly well. I'm sort of in awe of it because that doesn't always happen. I really enjoyed the storyline. It's quite different from the games up to this point. I liked the characters, and I really liked how well we see that overlap with characters from book to game. Like I said, it's kind of complex and messy, but Her Interactive pulled it off. They also managed to keep minor details the same. So having that element of a boy from another school being involved in the plagiarism scandal, and Her Interactive incorporated him in other ways with that storyline about boyfriends, being Leela's boyfriend, and then Izzy, in air quotes, stealing him, and just having them involved in different levels was really cool. There's a lot of other stuff that Her Interactive did on their own, and that really all came out of their focused storyline on Edgar Allan Poe. So like the Blackwood Society, that's not a thing in the book, but it was great for the game and really drove home that storyline and helped with the clues that we needed for Nancy to solve puzzles and for us as players to be able to be more involved and have activities to perform. So I don't know any other words, other synonyms I can use, but wonderful, superb, amazing, fantastic. I love this game. I think the adaptation is superb and fantastic. And again, I don't have any other synonyms that are coming to mind, but just wonderful. So I had a lot of fun doing this book to game comparison. It was really nice to see two very similar stories again. And like I said, it really has me in awe of what Her Interactive was able to achieve. So thank you everyone for taking the time to watch this comparison video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you too are able to appreciate all the work that Her Interactive did. Have a wonderful, supreme, awesome, fantastic, whatever synonym you want to use, day, you guys. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.